Welcome to another episode of Leaders of Today. Joining me today is Kevin Mecchella, a former educator and professional musician who is now inspiring youth across the country through music and mental health education. Kevin, once the class clown chasing laughs, is now a nationally recognized youth speaker and musician, helping students build strong mental health foundations through the power of music, humor, and honest conversation. As a former K-12 music teacher turned mental health advocate, Kevin understands the challenges young people face because he lived them. Reflecting on his own teenage years marked by risky choices and a hunger for validation, Kevin now uses these experiences to guide students towards more intentional decision-making. Through his dynamic music-infused programs, Kevin doesn't just entertain, he empowers. From all our conversations here at Peers Not Fears, you know we believe that leadership starts with a decision, which is so aligned with Kevin's message that every decision you make lays a brick in the foundation of your future. Whether on stage or in schools, Kevin brings a rare blend of vulnerability, insight, and energy that resonates deeply with youth and educators alike. I am so thrilled to have him here today to share his stories, his lessons, and the leadership he is building with the next generation. So let's dive right in. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from teens to titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Welcome, Kevin. I am so grateful to have you here today.
Lorraine, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
I can't wait for this conversation. I know we said a little bit before we started recording, but there's so much to your story that just already hits home, and I can't wait for my listeners to get a piece of it. So let's go back. Start at the beginning. Well, I guess it's not really the beginning, but go back to your teenage years where you were struggling with some of these things and tell us about those experiences and how they transpired and shaped you into the teacher you became, which then led you to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. If you can think of a reverse curve, like a reverse bell curve, it was like here, and then it was like, oh boy, and then we kind of came back up. That's like my entire trajectory of my life. And, when I was a kid, when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, I mean, for me, I didn't know it at the time, and most teenagers don't know what makes them tick. But my hunger for, as you said, validation and trying to be accepted is a fairly common thing amongst most teenagers. We all want to be liked. We get it, right? Because that's part of the development of our brains. We're trying to figure out what group we fit in. I mean, prehistorically, like literally our, not lack of a better word, our cult, like our group of people who are our protectors. And in high school, that's our friends. So we're trying to figure out who that is. And for me, I think it just was that need for validation was just on steroids. I mean, I just would do anything I could do to get that acceptance, whether it was doing extremely, I mean, really, really dangerous stunts on the back of, I can't even say, but on the back of like trucks and stuff, like crazy life death defying things, or just straight up zero dignity. I mean, zero self-respect. I mean, at my own expense, making other people laugh. And that was great. I found it because you know what? Guess what? I was part of the cool kids club. And it wasn't even like they were laughing at me. They were my really good friends, but we all had a good laugh together and it was a great time. The problem is later on in life, those types of behaviors and that need for validation followed me all the way through college and even into my professional career. And I realized that that stuff didn't work anymore. And when I graduated with a music education degree, I, again, still needed that acceptance. No, I wasn't, pranking the pizza guy anymore, but I was really having a hard time dealing with emotions and specifically negative emotions. Because when I graduated in '08, if we can all remember 2008, it was the financial collapse of the housing market. So it was tough to land a job and find a job and all these different things. And when you're living outside of your identity, when you're living incongruent with your identity, my identity was a successful music teacher. That's just who I was, right? I've transitioned from a class clown to now I want to be the best teacher I could possibly become. And when I was living incongruent with that, caused a lot of stress, caused a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know how to handle that. So I got into a major car accident because from my decisions that I've made over the years of partying and staying out too late and doing dumb and dangerous things led me to fall asleep at the wheel. And thank God everybody was okay. But that was the wake up point. That was the bottom of this bell curve that said, buddy, something's got to change right now. And it did. And I realized that right then and there was that our decisions are everything, from as small as what we decide to have for breakfast to as large as what we decide to do with our lives after high school to as abstract as what we decide to think about ourselves. What do we decide to think about others? And from then on in, it was a trajectory of everything is possible. That started actually with me doing my master's work at the Royal Liège Conservatory in Belgium. So I lived in Belgium, the absolute most transformative breakthrough time of my life. And that was kind of what started everything for me when it comes to speaking and performing and helping teens in any way I can. So that's kind of the trajectory, if you will.
Yeah, it's so different yet so similar. I think you nailed it when you described the bell curve. And I think so many of us graduate high school feeling like at the top of our game, right? And then we go to college and it's like, well, I was this big fish in a little pond, and now I'm a little fish, and I don't know who I am, where I belong, which opens up this world of exploration. But it also opens up the reckoning of like, am I happy with who I am? Do I like what I'm doing? Is it still working for me? And so I just think it's so fascinating.
Even worse for me, I was, when I went to college, not a small fish in a big pond. I was a somewhat big fish in a somewhat bigger pond. So I even had that continue throughout college. It was when I graduated college was when like, this is the real world, buddy. Like that. So
Yeah, I think the reality is it happens at lots of different points in our life, but it happens to most everyone. And we think it's special to us, and it is, but like so many people have taken that path, taken that journey. And I think, as you can tell, because I'm hosting this podcast, but I think it is so fascinating how these experiences combine into a place where now I am just offering all of this goodness back into the world and helping other people not make the mistake or not hit that bottom that I hit. And I'm there for them through it, you know? And I think I wrote down that the behaviors didn't work for me anymore. And you're right. We're always seeking that validation. And many of us who go into teaching, it's really interesting. My entire identity was teaching. And when there was that moment in 2020 where I was like, I can't do this anymore, I was like, I am nothing. It's so interesting. So, how did you transition sort of from the classroom to go for your master's? Like, what was it that
yeah.
drew you to that master program?
Well, again, the biggest thing was I was really in between jobs. I was trying to find, and that again was where you didn't have that identity. And especially a little side note there with teaching. It's funny you say that because it is very interesting. There are a few other professions like this, but teaching is one of those where we are very insular. We're in our own little bubble because it's so different. Like trying to force kids to know math. It's like very hard to do. And it's a very unique profession. When it's funny because my wife is a pediatric nurse practitioner in the oncology unit. When she hears all my teacher friends talking, she's like, yeah, I don't get this. She's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, that's not your job to get it. Because you know what? We wouldn't get your job either. Totally get it. But for me, though, when I was transitioning, I was trying to find a place to call home. I was in and out of different jobs. And again, that was not the script of life. You get your job and then you get your gold watch 30 years later. And it was a very big wake up call. And what happened was after the car accident, again, that was when my eyes were opened. And what I was able to see was if I want something to change, and it's funny you said behaviors before, I have to change my behaviors. I have to change
Mhm.
my action. And I have no idea what I was going to do, but all I did was started taking massive action. I just started doing things. I started making phone calls. I started having conversations. I started looking into programs, maybe audio engineering, maybe this, maybe that. And it was really interesting because my undergraduate symphony orchestra conductor, I kind of became friends with him after I graduated, and we were somewhat close, and we kind of went out every once in a while. And I was like, "What do I do?" He's like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, go study with Olivier." Now, I'm not going to go too far into this, but we had this mutual connection to this euphonium professor. That's the instrument I play in Liège, Belgium, because my professor here in undergrad in Hofstra, he was from Brussels, Belgium. So what happened was he already made this connection years ago. And when they came down and did a tour of the US, I listened to them and I'm like, that's incredible. And they kind of joked like, oh, one day you should study with Olivier. And I kind of was like, that's funny. I'll never be good enough for that. And that was the limiting belief I had. So when he gave me the okay to say, no, 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 like without more words than none, he said, you're good enough. Like he gave me the permission to believe in myself because he believed in me. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I could do that? It was really wild. So that was what was all I needed to do that. And he knew what I didn't know at the time. He knew that that reset, living abroad and living in a French speaking part of Belgium, that was going to do me real good. And it did. It was on.
Mm.
So.
Yeah. I want to kind of go back a little bit in making a decision, right? And so I think so often we get paralyzed in doing what's next because we're so afraid that the decision we make, whatever it is bound to be wrong. And I think somewhere along the line, I have not figured out where, we have learned that it is either right or it is wrong. There is no in between, there's no gray area. And so I serve kids between 12 and 16 because I find that when they become juniors in high school, around 16, everything becomes right or wrong, yes or no. And so I am curious about what your thoughts and how your experience help define that gray of decision making and laying the foundation, right? So we're not prophesizing that like you have to make all the right decisions. What you and I are saying is that every decision is taking you one step closer to where you're going.
So for me, I mean, specifically, I didn't have a choice because if I didn't make a decision, I was stuck. There was really
Right.
nothing I could do. So again, for people that have that reverse bell curve in their life and something dramatic happens, it's in a way, to be honest with you, almost easier. It's almost easier because you are forced because either, again, you have a set of values and beliefs and identity about who you are. And there's also this like threshold. Like for me, my identity is I am not addicted to drugs. I don't use drugs. I
Mhm.
don't, right? So there's that threshold. Then there's another threshold. So I wouldn't go below, but at the same time, like I wasn't living my other threshold of my identity. So if I wasn't going to make a decision, then I was going to stay here. And that disconnect of me and my life was just causing so many issues, which again, I see, okay, what I've been doing is not serving me. So that was kind of where I was. And then it's funny, you were having this conversation literally 2 nights ago. I was talking with my wife. And again, her life has been, it's just been this perfect graph going right up. And she's like in this point where she's having success in all areas of life, but she's like, I just don't know. I don't feel like she's like, there's this something missing.
Yeah.
Hard for her. So it's a very interesting, yeah, for me, I was forced. And when it comes to students, though, it's really interesting because as society, unfortunately, we have kind of a little bit done that to them. You mentioned 16. Well, why is 16 such a magic number? Well, because they're now in not the very beginning, maybe even the middle, and maybe in the end processes of figuring out what they're going to do after high school. And if they make the wrong choice and what to major in, well, then there's maybe $20,000 of 1 year of a mistake down the tubes. That's it. The societal issue of what we're doing with college and or what we're doing after school is a different conversation for a different day,
Yes.
but that's a huge part of it as well. But getting to the nitty gritty of it, students need to understand that perspective is everything. So the more times they hear people like me come into their school and speak and say like, I thought I was this, I did this, but I thought this was permanent, but like, look at that. Like it's every moment you have a decision to make. Do I have a sip of this whiskey? I'm just holding up a cup of water, I promise. A sip of this whiskey or a sip of this mushroom infused coffee. It's my decision. And it's either going this way or that way.
Yeah. And what I talk a lot about is that, a decision that you make may impact me negatively, and I'm going to tell you that that was a bad decision. But until I know what your outcome was or what your circumstances were, I can't actually define whether that was a good or bad decision. It may have impacted me negatively. That's a different thing. But so often, we as parents, we as educators who are guiding kids are going to deem a decision as wrong or bad. And our teens are hearing those messages and internalizing them as I am bad, I am wrong. And so it makes it really hard for them to move beyond. And, that $20,000 ticket is really like, as a mom or, a guider of a kid making that decision, I'm very much putting that pressure on because I don't want them to make that wrong decision, or I don't want to be stuck with that $20,000 bill. And so it becomes less about them and more about me.
You talk about internalizing a bad decision to I am bad and coming back to this word identity as a recurring theme. What I do is when I work with school districts, I'll come in and I'll present a program and I'll have somebody come up and I'll have them hold up a cup of water. And it's got just a tiny little bit of water. And I say, hold it out with your arm stretch out and say, is that heavy? And they're like, no, of course not. So I said, all right, well, let's make it heavier. Let's fill it up. We fill up their cup of life with stuff. We have, family, friends, school, projects, extracurriculars. We keep filling. And then eventually it's at the very, very top, right? And I say, okay, now is it heavier? And they're like, yeah, but I can hold on to it. Great. Can you hold on to it for the entire time I'm up here speaking? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably going to be tough eventually, no matter what time this is. Your cup of life is going to drop and spill over. For me, it was a close near-death car accident. For you, it maybe look like something else. For someone else, it might be something different, but you will eventually spill over. So what we need to do is to put our cup down. So I asked them to put it down on the table.
Yep.
And I say, hold on to it, but just rest it on the table. I say, now you could hold down on it for quite some time, right? They're like, yeah, it's super easy. I say, all you've done was got what? And someone calls out support. They've got some type of support. And then I say, okay, do me a favor. Now it takes 3 steps back. I say, did you guys notice I didn't ask them to go back to the seat and ignore their problems? I just said, create some space between them and their decisions, them and their emotions.
I love the visual and the experience. And they're all like, maybe not holding the cup, but they know exactly how it feels. And it's so strange because I've never actually physically held a cup out for a very long time, but it's like all over game shows, and somebody's seen it. But it is an empowering visual to know what support is, because then the other thing that leads us back is that asking for help can be so hard, especially as teenagers. And again, I know that that is truth. I don't know the why that's really behind it, but asking for help is virtually impossible for many of them.
I have an idea. I could be wrong, but I have an idea of why it's so hard for a teenager to ask help. Because going back to our development as Homo sapiens for the last 200,000 years specifically, we as tribes, when a child became a teenager, there was a lot of kind of tests. There was a lot of proving themselves. And I think this looked very different in many different areas of the world and different tribes, but there was a lot of, okay, go out, kill the lion, come back type of thing, right? So if they don't prove themselves, they have to be on their own. So as our prefrontal cortex develops, we have to try to prove ourselves. It's just a human nature thing as a teenager. So when they ask for help, that is almost indefinitely a sign of defeat, because I need you to help me with this. I'm not capable of doing this on my own yet. So I think that could be a potential reason, but not my.
Yeah, that sounds like a hurdle. That's
a doctoral dissertation right there. There you go.
Yeah, but also I think modeling as adults asking for help is hard for us. And so we've got our teenagers as educators or parents, we have a hard time asking for help. I'm like the mom who can do it all, the martyr who's like keeping all the things in the air, my dishes in the air, and then they come crashing down. And it's like, what if I had just asked for help sooner? Put my cup on that table and took 3 steps back, how much better it would have been. So I am curious about when you were teaching, what were some of the highlights that you found? Like you were working K through 12, so you were getting the whole gamut of experiences. What were some of your highlights during that time?
One specific moment sticks out, and this is common to music teachers, as common to most teachers, but I think specifically with music teachers. And then another one is kind of a more vague idea, but the first thing that kind of sticks out is this little fourth grade girl. I forget her name, Emma. Emma. I'm almost positive it was Emma. And we're teaching flute. I was a band director, so we're teaching anything from flute, clarinet, trumpet, trombone, drums, everything. And the flute's a tricky one because there's a lot of unnatural ways to position. You got to move this hand this way, this hand this way. You've got
Mm-hmm.
7, 8 fingers going on. It's tricky. And the whole goal with teaching a fourth grader, the very first instrument they'll ever pick up is to get them to make a successful sound as fast as possible and to get them to make a song as successful as possible. And we all know that first song we always learned, hot cross buns. But when we can do it, oh my gosh, because, if you just go back and forth, it's Mary had a little lamb. Oh my God, I played a song. And they go home, they play for mommy and dad, and they freak out. Everybody's in happy ever after. So, okay, it's just this face of, I got it. Like, it's just this one note. She popped the note. She looked at me, he's like, and I looked at her, and just, we made this connection of like, see, you can do anything. And that sounds so cliche and stupid, but like it's so important because again, whatever you want to do, at least you could take steps towards it. Absolutely. Anyway, that was just, I'll never forget her face. And then I think when working with high school students, I was specifically in a district where I was a leave replacement. I was a permanent sub basically. But as a permanent sub, I was knowing that I was a music band director. Whenever any of the music teachers out, I was automatically assigned there. So the music department kids really got to know me very quickly. And what they learned was that I am nothing any more special than they are. Because when they look at their band directors and their, choir directors and everything, they think of them as like gods among men. Now, just as a favorite subject teacher or a gym teacher or a coach, they think of them as like this almighty, all-being thing. And I was this guy who came in and, yeah, I could play, right? Conservatory trained musician. Sure, I can play pretty well. And they would listen to me playing it. But then I would talk with them because, I'd have those moments, I'd have that time. And there was nothing to hide, obviously being a professional, but I would just be real with them. We'd had real conversations and that understanding of like, oh yeah, he doesn't have it all figured out either. And that lifted a weight off their shoulders. Really, really, I could see it. I could just like literally visually see it on him. So
Yeah, it actually, your story with Emma reminds me of the power. I taught chemistry, and it's like sometimes it's really hard for people to be like, how did you go from chemistry to leadership? It's that moment that you're talking about with Emma is for me, I can get teenagers to do hard things and I get them to realize that they can do hard things. And there is no greater triumph than empowering a young person to know that they can do hard things. And so I love that story about Emma. It's great.
yeah, good kid.
Yeah. How about when you were in high school as the class clown? Did you find that you got in trouble at all? Or were you able to sort of navigate being the funny guy and the performer?
Oh, I navigated well. I don't know how, but I did it quite well. I navigated so well where I was voted as prom king as a senior, but the catch is the teachers voted. I love to just be completely vulnerable there. Like, it's okay, kids. I'm not as cool as you think I am. But like, what is funny is that I was not a bad kid. I was not a bad teenager. Every prank that I pulled was always self-deprecating and it was always self-harm. I never hurt anybody else. And that was important for me because I knew what that felt like. We all at one point in our life can know what it feels like to be either bullied, if you want to classify that, or just put down or not feeling like you're enough. So I
Yeah.
never wanted to have other people feel like that. Now, granted, maybe certain people got caught in the crosshairs or something. Maybe at one point somebody did.
Right.
I don't know. I'll tell you because my 20-year reunion is coming up in a couple of weeks, but we'll figure that out. But no, I navigated well. I very rarely got detention, very few times. It's funny you ask this because the story I tell in my programs when I come to school is one of my very simple but effective pranks was called the narcolepsy. And I would just pass out at the most random times possible. Again, never hurt anybody. But again, the one teacher who didn't know it, oh yeah, she freaked out. Boy, she screamed like I never heard anybody scream. So I'm laying there and I'm pretending to be out cold and I'm like thinking to myself, oh boy, this just got real bad real quick. And she looks up at the rest of the class, sees everybody holding back their laughter, so she figures it out, and her inflection just changes right away. Oh, Kevin, I'm so sorry you're not feeling well. I guess I'm going to have to call the nurse. So I'm thinking she's going to call the security or the dean. No, she actually called this poor nurse. This poor woman, like a minute later, burst in the door as if she just sprinted a quarter mile. And like, what is going on? I'm like, it's me. And I'm realizing that my teacher, Miss Joyce, never told her that it was a joke for whatever reason. I don't know. So now the nurse buys it and I dig in. I'm like, she's like, what is this? Wait, have you diagnosed at birth? Like, do you have any other symptoms? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay. Yeah. I was diagnosed when I was 6. Yeah. It's a hard life, a lot of doctor's appointments, but I get through. So now she's working me up the whole thing. She buys it, the blood pressure cuff, the thermometer, everything. And the bell rings for the next period. So I just go for a Hail Mary. I'm like, excuse me, I'm fine. I've dealt with this my whole life. Can I go back to class? And she says, sure. And that was the end of it. That was the end of it. Other than Miss Joyce, my English teacher, called home to mom. And at that point, mom was so fried with me. She was like, what did you do to your poor teacher today? Like, that was it. That was the end of it. So yeah, very few times got in trouble, but yeah, I tried to navigate the best I could.
That's amazing. Did you play instruments in high school? What was your instrument of choice?
Yeah. So when it comes to class clown, I also was fairly serious in music and drama and theater and all that stuff. So I play the euphonium, which is a small tuba. You can think of it. It's used in like a lot of military bands, collegiate bands, and some trombone as well. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. No stringed instrument though, huh?
I just picked up the ukulele in 2020 as everybody picked up something new.
Yeah.
And that's the only string I can kind of strum a little bit. That's about it.
Okay. Did you ever have to teach any orchestra or anything like?
It's crazy. I did a master's lab orchestra program, and that was tricky, and because you're conducting a high school level orchestra that they're pretty decent players, that was different. It's a whole different level of way of conducting. And yeah, it's fun. I'm a brass. Yeah.
Let's go into what kind of advice would you give to a teenager who maybe identifies with that need for validation or the need to make other people laugh or the search for belonging? What advice would you give to that teenager?
I'll give you 2 ways to do this. If I had a visual, I would do it one way. If I could only talk to this person, I would say very simply, what you care about now, do you think your 80-year-old self would care about? And 9 times out of 10, it's a no. And now the problem with that is that, yes, there's some levity there and it makes them understand the grand scope of their life, but it still sucks in the moment. It's still really hard because I want to be liked. I want Sally to, I want to be with the cool high school football players. I want this understanding, So then what I would say is like, listen, again, coming back to perspective, there is an amazing TED Talk by Tim Urban, and he was the first one I saw do this thing called the 90-year calendar. And what it is he wrote a little box for every week of somebody's life if they live to 90 years old, just a kind of a hopeful age to aspire to, an average age. And at first he's like, hey, there's not that many boxes on this page. But at the same time, if you start filling in the boxes, a high school student will realize they've only filled in the first, 16 rows out of, or whatever it is, like,
Yeah.
So that visual is like, oh, wow, again, first of all, I have so much time in front of me. I have so much is going to change. Again, when in the middle of that graph, do you think that you're going to be caring about the same thing as you are a third of the way down, as a quarter of the way down? It's a wonderful visual, and that's what I would definitely show them if I could.
Yeah, I think that's super valuable because, when you're in it, it feels like it's never going to end. And, like having the perspective that, like, we always say you won't think about this when you're, 25, 30. But like that 13-year-old, that 14-year-old is like, you don't understand what I'm going through. But, we've all had that thing that's hurt and
Right.
been real hard.
And then lastly, too, with helping them in the moment, though, because again, it still doesn't necessarily help them in the moment, because when tomorrow comes around, they're still going to be feeling the same way. I think a lot of that is just languaging how they're feeling. If they're feeling sad, that's a very first grade vocabulary to identify how they're feeling. Are they feeling anxious, depressed? Are they feeling jealous? Are they feeling insecure? Labeling the emotion of how they're feeling, number one, is important to figure out really what's going on, because maybe it's that I don't really need to be with the cool kids, but my friend group right now, I'm feeling a little distant from. Well, then there's a big easy fix here, because then we can have tactics and a conversation of how we can, go about that. And then, labeling it, I think, is a huge thing. I think just getting clear about what they're feeling and why they want it in the first place.
Yeah, so valid. Kevin, you talk at schools. Tell us how people can find you, what they can do to reach out if they're interested in having you come share these visuals and these clues. And like, what ages are you talking to and who is your target?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you search my name, Kevin Mecchella, you'll find everything. You'll find all the socials. You'll find my website, kevinmecchella.com. That has a lot of information about how the program kind of breaks down. Mostly I speak anywhere between 6th grade and 12th grade. I do some college work, but that's primarily, middle school, high school students. And I offer everything from assemblies to workshops to online courses and resources, physical and digital, and all those good stuff. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today and your insights and your vulnerability.
Trust me, being vulnerable is my pleasure. Lorraine, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.